When you look back on those 20 years, what were the highlights of it?
I think the main thing is working for an organization that is consistent with my values, and a very supportive board of directors that supports community economic development approaches and empowering communities, and those are things that was important to me, and doing work that I thought was making a contribution and changing, empowering disempowered communities. And it was really important to that, and I found it really great that the Quint board of directors was on the same wavelength there, and they wanted the same thing, and gave me a lot of latitude. And I think there's a high level of trust between myself and the board of directors over the years to allow that work to happen and move it forward. So that's I think why I was able to stay there for so long, and not feel like I had to move on to do other things. And that's I think one of the important things is to have an organization that supports the direction that you think is good for the community, and that was important to me. So that was, I guess, that's the biggest factor for working at Quint for the last 20 years. And then we were able to accomplish a lot of projects and initiatives and programs that were I think we're making a real difference in the community, and maybe moving a social and economic agenda forward, or being part of a movement to move a social and economic agenda forward, and setting an example that things, that there are alternatives, right, and that we can do things a little differently, that create economies that work for communities, and not always having to work for the economy, like that's sort of the typical thing, right? So that was important to me, is that we were showing examples of alternatives, and that communities could do things, even when many people were saying, no, the communities can't do that. We were proving them wrong, I guess, in a lot of respects, and that's a good example for others, I think.
What were some of the initiatives that are kind of stand out in your head when you look back over the last 20 years?
Well, I think the first one that was the biggest one for Quint, and that sort of got the ball rolling, was we were doing home ownership co-ops for low-income families, and I remember when we were in the early stages of that program, we had people in government and people in financial institutions and saying, "Oh no, people with low incomes can't. This won't work. They can't. They're not in a position to own homes." And but the whole program the pilot was a success, and all the subsequent co-ops and the 110 families, we as collectively, demonstrated that it could be a success, right? And I think that really set Quint forward in the area of affordable housing, and we won a National Housing Award for that work in 2001. So that was kind of a highlight for us, and then we moved on to, in the area of housing, we set up two transitional homes, one for young men and one for young women who were trying to keep their kids from. And then we started buying up apartments in the core area and converting them into community-focused housing, and so that was an interesting project. And then we moved on to setting up Station 20 West. Of course, that was probably a 10-year effort from the beginning of the idea to seeing it all happen. And then more recently, in early 2000s, we set up the Core Neighbors at Work program, and today it's really grown into this dynamic program that's serving over 1,600 people a year in the core neighborhoods, helping them get back into the workforce and finding jobs and helping them with resumes, and doing all kinds of workshops in the community and job fairs. So that's a real pleasure to see that one take off and become so dynamic. And then now we've just completed our first new construction subsidized affordable rental housing. So there's 26 townhouses on Avenue O that families just moved into a few weeks ago, and that's really rewarding to see that as well. So there's been a lot of highlights over the years.
When you look back, you've obviously had particular challenges. What did you see as some of your major challenges in terms of the community economic development here in Saskatoon?
I could see that communities could be doing a lot more if we had a more supportive environment, public policy environment. I even feel like at Quint itself, we have a lot of capacity, and we could have been scaling things up even more. I think we were pretty successful in a lot of the work we've been doing, but we could have probably doubled and tripled the scale of work that's going on if we had governments at all levels that were more supportive and prioritized community economic development and policies that support it. But we've been sort of paddling against the current in a lot of respects, and still being able to do a few things. But I just look at other jurisdictions where they have supportive public CED public policy lenses, and they're able to do a lot, move the agenda a lot quicker, And so that's one thing, and the other one is, it's working in marginalized communities. It's not always easy work. There's all kinds of issues that people are confronting. There's tensions. There's disagreements, and like somebody said, community development work is never a straight line. It's a bunch of ups and downs and struggles. And I mean, the point is you're trying to create empowerment for disempowered communities, and that's always a tough job, right? And people have all kinds of issues that they're trying to get over, and so it's hard work at times, right? I guess one of the big most difficult things was when we had to close down the Good Food Junction Co-op grocery store. I mean, we'd worked for 5 to 7 years to get that thing up and running, and it did operate for 3 years, but it just wasn't. Sales were not sufficient to keep it going, and so we had in January 2016 we had to shut the store down, which was really heartbreaking for a lot of us who worked hard. And even today, when I walk around the community, people are still saying, well, we really need a grocery store in the core area. There's no place to buy groceries. And I'm sort of going, well, we tried to set one up, but people need to support it. And like the old saying, I think it's from the National Farmers Union, if you want to buy food in your neighborhood, you got to buy food in your neighborhood, right? So people have to support it and shop there, make a conscious decision to shop there. So those are some of the harder moments, but by far the positive things totally outweigh the difficult moments. I mean, you wouldn't appreciate all the work if you didn't have to struggle for it, I guess.
Len, do you have some words for the community? I mean, this has been a long time job building community economic development. But when you think about that, what's your words to others who are trying to move ahead on community economic development policies and practice You've also had an international side where you've worked in Mozambique. But and for example, you've talked about buracos, which in Mozambique means holes in the economy.
Yeah.
But what's your kind of overall message that you'd like to pass on?
Well, it's not like I guess this is long-term work. We're trying to address issues that have evolved and were created over many decades, right? And so the solutions are not short-term. The solutions are long-term, and people have to look at it from a long-term perspective and be prepared to be in it for the long haul, both because you can't fix these things overnight. You can't create healthy economies, in 1 or 2 years. It's an ongoing process, right? And plus you have to work with community over long term so that you can build relationships and levels of trust in communities.